Ashton. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
So do you want to just start off and tell us a little bit about like where you grew up and how you got into filmmaking?
So I am from Syracuse, Utah. Um, I don't snowboard or ski, which is so lame. But I live near an island. I live near the Great Salt Lake. So I'm like 20 minutes north of Salt Lake City. And grew up as a kid just I feel like all of our stories are the same. Like we all had like our dad's giant VHS camera or like Super 16 or something. But yeah, dude, I just grew up messing around with cameras and really just trying to recreate um, movies like Gone in 60 Seconds. Um, Classic Nicolas Cage. So good, dude. Blonde Angelina Jolie. And then all the Fast and Furious movies. So I just was like, oh man, I get my buddies together and like just take little toy cars and just like and this is before we knew how to edit too. This is like when I was like 9 years old, 8 years old, and I would just do the sound effects by like whispering into the or being really loud into the built-in mic. And so grew up in a great area, happy family, classic. My family's religious family, where a lot of people call us Mormons, but um, it's also called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So we grew up really close, um, did a lot of stuff together. So I just grew up making movies with my brothers, my two brothers, and making movies with my buddies. I think like the funnest thing to do in high school, like I learned how to use iMovie so I could edit stuff. And the funnest thing was like going and messing around with the boys and then taking it to all these girls' house and be like, watch this movie we made. And they're just like, we don't give a crap. Like, but we were just like, this is so sick. And but yeah, that was how we thought we would impress girls. Like, we'll go show them the movie we made and they'll want to make out with us. And none of them wanted to make out with us. And still they don't. That's probably not the intro you're looking for.
No, that's great. So like you mentioned like you grew up in a religious household. So I guess like I thought Mormons like they don't allow technology and stuff. So it's a bit, I guess it's different to that what I'm thinking.
Yeah, a lot of times we get grouped in with like Jehovah's Witnesses, or not. And I don't know enough about Jehovah's Witnesses to know if I don't think they're anti-technology or anything, but no, like I'd say like the weirdest thing, and by weirdest, it's just like the thing that most people find surprising is that like we we don't generally drink coffee or alcohol or smoke tobacco kind of thing. But and then just general Christian values, just like keeping the law of chastity, being a good neighbor, going to church, all this stuff. But yeah, technology. No, my dad, dude, we grew up and my dad was big into tech. He just loved everything to do with technology. And so I grew up surrounded by, Sony parts and pieces and cameras and all the fun stuff. And so a lot of tech back in the day.
Cool. And so like you mentioned Gone in 60 Seconds and Fast and Furious, like was there any other kind of like computer games or like videos or TV shows that you kind of like inspired by?
Growing up, video games was just the funnest thing ever. And there was a computer game called Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 3. And my computer's RAM could like hardly handle it. It was just like click, 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 but it was so much fun because you could either play as a policeman or, I don't know, just the guy running away from the police. And I'd play that for hours and hours and hours. And then, when we upgraded and finally, like I bought my own Xbox, and it's kind of a funny story. So all I wanted to buy an Xbox for when I was a kid was to play Halo. And I finally saved up enough money to buy an Xbox. And then my mom was like, what does M mean? Rated M. And I was like, oh, it means mature. And she's like, you can't play this. I was like, son of And so my dad's like, "Oh, I'll buy a game that you can play that's not Am." And I'm like, "Dude, I don't care. I just want to play Halo." But he got me Need for Speed Underground, which, if you've ever played that, man, those are classic games. Anyway, all the same vibes as like Gone in 60 Seconds and Fast and Furious. So played those games nonstop.
You mentioned you were kind of like trying to recreate some of those, like with the handy cam in the backyard type vibes. Like, what was like the after those kind of films? Like, when did you start kind of getting a bit more serious, and like, how did you build up until like, I guess, moving to LA because you're from Utah? Like, how was that kind of transition?
Yeah, I'd say that's a good question. Um,
Well, there might be some stuff before that, I guess, that happened. Like, did you go to film school or like?
no, and I'm trying to give you like the most condensed version, but long of the short was in high school, I loved doing film, but I never thought of it as like I can make a living doing this. And it's kind of funny, and I really wanted to go to Washington D.C. And it's really, and I kind of realized this later in life, but it was all because of a movie. But anyway, after high school, I went on a 2-year humanitarian mission for the church. So, like, if you ever see those boys in the white shirts and the black ties and little name tags, I did that for 2 years in Brazil. So you kind of put your life on hold. And then when I came back, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Washington, D.C. And I kind of put like the whole dream. And by dream, I just like the idea of like making films to make money just wasn't there. And I bumped into this kid on campus who had a DSLR, and he was doing video on it. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. Because, before you just had like your fixed camera with your fixed aperture, there's no depth of field or anything like that. And he was, can't remember what it was, like a Canon, I think it was a 5D or 7D or something. Anyway, it was just like, dude, you can film on that. And I was so like, oh, I want to do that, and I had a buddy who had done wedding videos, and he's like, dude, you can make, and college money. Like, he's like, you can be rich, dude. You can be so rich doing wedding videos. And so I was like, oh, cool. So I asked my parents. Well, at first I got my tax returns, and I was like, sweet, I have like a couple grand. I can either go with the boys and go on like a fun little trip, or I can buy this camera. But I only had enough to buy the body. And so I asked my parents if they could loan me a couple bucks to buy a lens. And they're like, sure. And I started doing that. And I loved it so much, right? I just was like, I could make something decent now. Because before it was really just like, this is just fun. I knew it could never look good, but it's like, shoot at 2.8 with a couple things ND. It's like, wow, this looks amazing. And so I started doing weddings. I did my first wedding. I did for like $200 just for like one of my roommates. It was garbage. It was so bad. And then I pitched it to these other guys. I was like, yeah, I've been doing wedding videos for a really long time. I've been doing it for like 2 weeks. And then I charged them like $2,000, and they're like, oh, that's great. And I was just like, $2,000 in college, man, was like, I'm rich. I'm so rich. And so that kind of, a long story short, I keep saying long story short until I'm telling the long story. But I ended up going to Washington, D.C. and continuing to pursue that career path, all the while doing film on the side, corporate video, stuff like that. And it wasn't until I got to this point in my career in Washington where it's like, okay, now I need to go practice law. If like the long goal was to lobby. I wanted to be corrupt, dude. I just was like, I'm ready to be full on lobbyist corrupt. No, but like that was the plan. And I realized the cost of that plan meant doing all these things I didn't want to do for years. And I had no desire to practice law. And I was like, I wonder if I could do film, like, and really do it. And at this point I was married and had a kid. So it's like the messing around time was less, you know. And so I was like, I reached out to a smattering of film guys. And this is like when Vimeo was this big thing. So I would, when Congress was not in session, I'd sit at my desk and all of Capitol Hill, by the way, when Capitol Hill is not in session, everyone's on Netflix all day. And so like the internet's slow. So anyway, I'd get on and I'd try to watch Vimeo videos and I'd have to, end up trying to download them so I could plan because it would play back so slow. But I just watched Vimeo videos for hours. I was like, I want to do this. I reached out to this one director. He's like, yeah, come on out. I'm shooting in Manhattan, like this 2-day pharmaceutical ad. Just come hang. And I was like, oh, cool. And this is after like a bunch of people just didn't respond, because it's like, who's this kid, So I go out and he says, really nice guy. And he showed me around and, he's like, this will never make the reel, but it's, this is what I do. And then I talked to his producer and I'm just like, I've never seen this world in this way. Like in my mind, all commercials is like, oh, that's like a couple guys with the camera. Had no understanding of like production and just seeing all of this production for like, one of the ads is like spends 25 seconds saying you're going to die and your eyes are going to fall out, but this will help with your ED. It was one of those kind of commercials, but it was cool. And his producer took me aside and we were talking. He's like, you can do this. And it's funny because I didn't mention that it's like, I'm thinking about doing this. I want to know. He brought it up by himself and he's like, you could do this. And that was like, boom, that's my sign. I'm doing this. And I quit my job. Like, I think I went home. I was like, yeah, I'm quitting. And my wife's like, cool. That's not stressful at all. And so we realized it's like, okay, we could either pay rent in DC and start my business, which by the way, DC is the creative black hole of the world. Or I could move back to Utah and rent could be a fraction. I could start going there. And so this is the longest answer you probably ever had for a question, but I came back and I was like, okay, now I just have to make this work. And I'm grateful that since that day, I've never had to take a job. Like I've been able to just do it. And it's by asking a million questions, calling a million people and just being like, cool, I'm just gonna figure it out. And then you just connect with like-minded individuals. And
so what was the Washington DC? You said you watched a movie and then you were inspired by that. What was the job there?
This is funny. Every time I mention this movie, everyone's like, well, I've never heard of it. It's directed by the guy who did Shawshank. It's called The Majestic. It's a Jim Carrey, not as a silly guy. He's like playing this dramatic role. And long and the short is he's this Hollywood guy. It's back in the 30s or something. And he loses his job. Then he falls off a cliff kind of thing, loses his memory, goes into a town, and they think he's someone else. And he doesn't know he's not this other person. And the other person that he thinks he is, when they're like, you're this guy who's come back from World War II. I can't believe you're alive. We all thought you were dead. And he's like, oh, and this man was a man of honor, whereas Jim Carrey's original character wasn't a man of honor. And then as he kind of comes to, he realizes, oh my gosh, I'm not who they think I am. And then he's subpoenaed and brought before this court. And they're basically saying you're a communist. And basically, the crux of the movie is he, instead of just being like, okay, fine, I'll just do whatever you tell me. He stands up. He's kind of like become the man who they thought he was. And there's just this simple scene where he raises a Medal of Honor up to the judge, and the whole room goes quiet, which would never happen, by the way, like for in a million years. And the whole room just goes quiet, and he says this, epic one-liner, patriotic, and I didn't realize it, but as a kid, I watched that and I was like, I want to do that, and really, I didn't realize it's like, that's not practicing law. That's just saying something, a director, a storyteller. We want to say something. And that resonated with me in this movie. It's like, oh, I want to say something like that. I want people to quiet down and listen up so I can say something important. And dude, I didn't realize this until like years after I'd been doing film full time. It's like, oh, that's why I wanted to go to DC so bad, was because of that. So
That's interesting. Yeah, because like some people, like you said, inspired by certain movies, and they might think it's taking you one direction, but really it's the movie that's inspiring you. So, and the filmmaking process. So yeah, you moved back to Utah after going to Washington DC, and then what did you continue doing, like wedding videos or corporate work, or like what kind of work were you doing, like in terms of filmmaking back then?
anything. I was just like, I just need to make money, and I did a bunch of corporate things. I didn't. Luckily, I didn't have to go back into doing weddings. Not that there's anything wrong with weddings, but it's like if you choose to do weddings, you can make a great living. But like, it's stressful, you know. I mean, dealing with brides all the time, that sucks. No, but I did everything, and then I just worked on everything that I could as a grunt for free, just to like, because you know, I went from having this whole different network of people from DC and political connections, and I had like no film connections. And so I just came back and took like 30 people out to lunch. Hey, let me take you out to lunch, pick your brain, you know, and a handful of them were like, sure. And I went out and just learned. I was like, hey, if you ever need anyone. And at this point, I still didn't really understand, you know, a director does this, a DP does this, an AD does this, a producer does this, you know, all the way down to hair and makeup and set design. It's like, it's not, you know, 10 people doing everything. It's like they all have jobs. And so I learned a lot just by going to these lunches, just asking people out to lunch, asking them questions, working for free. And then, you know, if you have a good attitude and you're not too stupid, they'll eventually invite you back to maybe pay you for something, hopefully, sometimes. And then I just kept building that up. And then it was like in my first year back, I talked to a guy, and he asked a pretty crucial question for me to me, and he's like, you know, what do you want to do? And like at this point, it's like I was embarrassed to say I want to direct, you know, because who was I? Who am I to say I want to direct? I was like, I don't know, I just, you know, I want to be in film. I want to do all the film stuff, and you know, have an excuse to wear a fisherman's beanie and act a little pretentious. And he's just like, you need to decide. You need to choose a lane. Great advice. And he's like, don't say I'm the colorist, VFX artist, director, DP, writer, producer, crafty guy, because then you're nothing to people who want to hire you. And so I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'll choose a lane, and I just kind of committed. I was like, I'm a director. I had no business saying that, you know, and no one really does. You know, we're all practicing, we're all learning. And so I was like, okay, that's just what I'll do.
Yeah, so like specializing in like a one role, like to try and say that you're the one guy for like a certain like genre of directing. Did you make a choice back then, like I want to be a director and I want to specialize in a certain like food or cars or like corporate, or like what kind of thing did you kind of hone your skills on into?
Yeah, good question. I knew I wanted to say something. That's really all I knew. A lot of it came from like a debate background. There was something really rewarding about articulating something very well and persuading someone, that kind of like stuck with me. And I was like, I want to, you know, at that point, it's like I love car stuff, right? I love cars. It was like little action movies. It's like that'd be cool. I was like, I don't want to do food. I don't necessarily want to do fashion too much. I want to do features, right? Like I think in the back of all of our brains, like I want to freaking make a movie, man, good one. And then we all make a really crappy one. And we're like, crap, maybe I'm not cut out for this. But no, you know, and still, I mean, I'm currently I'm working on a feature, and by working on it, I'm writing it. It's going to take a minute. It's going to take a year to finish just the writing. But that's what I've been kind of working up to. And I was like, okay, how do I get there? how can I learn enough so I can do those? Because there's within automotive, there's different type of automotive, tiers of work and whatnot. And um, I'm really interested in automotive stuff for two reasons. One, cars are fun. I grew up, my dad owns a car shop. I grew up working on cars, busting tires and stuff. And I love cars. It's super fun. The other thing was like the budgets are a little bit bigger than a lot of other things. And a buddy of mine said, I was like, why is that? And he's like, well, it's like one of the biggest purchases that people make that really does surround their identity. There's a difference between a Jeep Bro, and a Mercedes Benz, class driver, and then a Subaru, and then, a million other, like there's personalities. And so it's like, it's a very emotional purchase, and it's high dollars. So those projects will pay a little bit more. So it's like, cool, I want to do those. And then I will also want to create short films or commercial work that says something that I believe, in a persuasive way. And so that's kind of that was the goal, and that still is the goal. My real goal is to be in production on my feature in 2026 or 2027. That would be awesome. And so it takes a lot of time and money and people to do anything. I'm sure you've dealt with this too, and the people that you talk to. It's just like it takes a village to do stuff. Just to do a 30-second commercial, it takes a bunch of people. So yeah, that's the long goal. That was the goal then. That's the goal now still.
Yeah, I just found your Instagram. So like scrolling through, like at the start, it has like your Washington DC days with the clean shaven and the suit on. So is that the same guy? And then go moving up, and like obviously you're like a family man and weddings and stuff. And so yeah, like once you had that goal of like, all right, I want to do kind of like car commercials. What was like the first kind of car commercial that you did?
I did a spec that actually so this is super rare. I did a spec for a company called Nokian Tires. So remember Nokia cell phones? They also make tires. They're like the inventor of the winter tire. But a buddy's like, yeah, you could just make a commercial for them. They could buy it. And it's like, which is pretty naive. I've learned. I got so lucky that they ended up being a client. Like I'm still doing stuff with them now. But like I was like, I could do some truck stuff. My dad has a cool truck. I'll film him. And this guy had a cool truck, and I shot this spec ad for their tires, because I was like, I'm not going to fool anyone doing like a Ford spec, because it's like I've done nothing, and I'm going to try to convince people. Yeah, I did that for Ford. So I was like, tires. No one, tires. No one thinks about tires really, but it allowed me to shoot vehicles. And so I shot it. It wasn't good. And I sent it to the company. They're like, this is awesome. And I was like, sick. Yeah, of course it's awesome. And this is like this is back when I like got this big loan out. I thought I just want to own a bunch of gear. And I got like the Ronin M, the small one. And like, I'd hang out the side of my buddy's car, just like, so unsafe, like the most unsafe, and just getting these cool angles and, getting it too low, and then a rock hits luckily I had a clear filter on it. And anyway, they bought it for like, by bought it, it was next to nothing. And I didn't know anything about licensing. I was just like, yeah, cool, $5,000. Wait, and then I started doing stuff for them. So
that's good that, yeah, you were able to make a spec and then sell it, because like you said, it's very rare, but you luckily picked the right company to kind of make something for.
Total fluke. Like I remember trying to do it after. I was like, sweet, that just happens all the time. And like everyone was like, the hell, this blows. I did one for Goodyear, and they're just like, nice, good job, man. And I was like, you don't want to buy it? And they're like, no. But yeah, that was a lucky first thing, just making a spec in it. selling it. And by selling it, just broke even on cost.
So then after you did that one and then you tried a few more times, like a few failures, was there like any, like what happened after that? Any like good commercials that you started to get better at?
Yeah, just doing a bunch of bad ones until you do a good one, and then a bunch of commercials where it's like just we did a bunch. I did a bunch of dealership stuff, which is just snooze. It couldn't be more snooze. Person comes in, oh, I like this car, and just a bunch of voiceover. Come on down, which was like, I wouldn't even call that automotive. You're just shooting stationary vehicles.
But how did you get the dealership ones? Was that like through a production company or advertising agency, or did you just hit them up directly and say, I want to
just hit them up, which, there's this feeling, and part of it is necessary. It's like there's certain doors you can't open without the right people that have the right keys because it's been there the longer, kind of thing. Like agents, like I can't call Google, be like, let me do a commercial for you, which I was, when I didn't know anything, I was just like, I'm just going to go call these people, and some of those doors you can't open, but there's a lot of doors that I think if you just try, which is kind of like the attitude of like your podcast, I'm just going to reach out to people, and people say no and people say yes. And it's like, that's the attitude of anyone who's successful. They just figure it out. And so I just, called people and emailed people, pretended like I was like, been doing this for years, kind of did the same thing like I did with, my wedding video business back in the day. I was like, oh yeah, I've been doing this forever. Might be able to fit you in. And some people are like, nice try. And then I ended up working with a local agency in Utah that had a couple of small things. And so it was cool to learn, it's cool to learn and see, oh, we can't shoot blue hour, over and over and over. We have one day of shooting. Well, okay, then these images, might not be what I want them to be. And those are limitations you just make the best of. And then hopefully budgets get bigger, trust is increased, and you can do fun stuff.
For the dealership stuff, like in terms of like, did they take the creative lead and say, oh, we want to just talk in front of the camera and point to the car and stuff, and you kind of have to just go along with what they wanted? Like, how did you get into like more of like the storytelling, like commercial, like the bigger kind of budget kind of stuff?
And just trying to convince people to spend money and do something cool, which is like, I think the ultimate challenge of most creators, trying to get a client to do something that doesn't totally suck. And there's places, sometimes you just go, hey, this is money, just great. Taking home a check, that's all that matters sometimes. But if you do that too long, you'll burn out and you'll kind of be like, why am I in film? You have to have a project, man. Like, one thing I love about this industry is it's a lot of times it's like it's your profession and it's something you enjoy, or should be something that you enjoy. And I found that the times where I'm like starting to not enjoy it so much is when it's like, oh man, I'm making money, and I'm making everything that blows, everything, I have nothing to share other than BTS. Sharing BTS, look at me, I'm crushing it. And it's like, no, you never post the thing because it's like, I don't want anyone to see it. But then you get to do fun stuff, and then you get some trust. Like I've noticed what I learned a few years ago was like, I'd see a director's cut of something and I was like, whoa, that's sick. How did the client approve that? Like, that seemed like a more risky thing, which can happen, but it's not as often as you think. And I found out that these directors would, like a portion of it was commissioned. Most of the stuff that you see with like an arm car, it's like, that's expensive. Those shots are probably commissioned, and that's going to some 30-second spot that plays in the central United States or East Coast or whatever, and then they'd supplement their stuff and go shoot their own thing, and like make something cool out of it. And I was like, oh, I'll do that. Just because it's like some of these things, I was like, dude, how did client approve that? Because that's way too cool. Like one of them was this spot for like Hyundai, I think, or something a couple of years ago. I was like, man, that's so sick. Like, and then I found out, oh, I found a bunch of the director's footage on Film Supply, which sometimes they'll do, but usually it means like, oh, the director went and shot those things, and it was only like a couple shots that were in, and I was like, oh, he went and shot that stuff, and then made his version. I was like, oh, I want to do that, because then you can make something more interesting than just the vehicle. Because like most clients, it's just like, show the vehicle, all the features, show the features. If we don't see that, if we don't see the monitor, it's like, what's the point of this whole thing? And then it's like nothing else. And it's like, you got to show some, human connection or some elemental connection that makes it cool, and like, I always kind of talk about how it's like, remember the old iPod commercials? It was like you didn't even see the product other than like the wires from the earbuds, and it was just a silhouette against a color of a screen, and they were just jamming out. And they weren't like, here's the iPod, check out the iPod. It was just like, that's you jamming, that's iPod, that's the experience, right? That's the feeling. And it's hard to convince some clients. It's like, sometimes it's just the budget, you don't have it for that. But it's like, sometimes it's hard to convince. It's like, dude, let's do something cool that feels cool, instead of just show something. And sometimes that's not the goal of advertising. A lot of times it's not to put off a feeling. It's just to freaking say the name Honda and have it be top of mind because you're at the gym and it's on the TV. And so, those are jobs you just get paid for, and that's fine.
I think that's good advice in terms of like, if you have a commercial that somebody's paying for, and it's only going to take an hour to shoot, and then you can spend the rest of the time going and filming your own stuff. But I guess it's a matter of like balancing the politics between like running off and grabbing stuff. But like, I know like David Fincher, he quotes, like, people make fun of him saying, yeah, he's doing like 100 takes of the one thing, but it's like, why would you spend all this money and time and like people's like energy to get to this one spot and then do one take and then move on? It's like he wants to go there and he wants to film 100 times to get it perfect. So the same kind of thing, you could do what they want, and then you can spend that time with, you have these people for another 10 hours, you could go off and get some other footage that you can create your own little spec spots of. And like the director's cuts, I see all the time, like the director's cuts are like much better than the original spot, because the client or whatever, it's like, oh, that doesn't fit our brand. So sometimes they don't even get to release it. But if they cut it into a whole different another commercial, then I guess that's another way around it.
Yeah, and politics plays into everything, right? So it's like, sometimes it's just like the creative person has zero creative ability. There were some hire that just like you don't know the reason for, and they just want to say something and make sure that that they're in control. And then sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. I feel like a lot of those negotiations come down to good faith, right? Trying to be like, hey, I get what you're trying to do, like recognizing people. Like there's one project I worked on, and they were pretty hell-bent on doing this a certain way, and I was like, I really wanted it to be something that I could use afterwards, like because it was a good enough of an idea that I was like, hey, this could make the reel. And they just wanted to take it this awful direction, and you can't go to him and be like, dude, your idea is the worst. You're an idiot. Doesn't work. And you have to be so careful because everyone's feelings or, tensions are high, and you just go, I love that, and I can see why you wanna do that. And he's like, "I have a couple ideas how we could accomplish that," and then give him a bunch of ideas that have nothing to do with their idea. But if you just give him credit, like, "Dude, you're so smart, man. You're so smart. I'm so glad you're on our team." And then, try to persuade him to do something totally different. Um, and, sometimes you can't, and you just go, "Hey, I get it, you can't." There's just limitations sometimes, and sometimes those limitations, a lot of times those limitations are political, where it's like, this is a bad idea and we all know it, but it's because so and so said it and they're at this point, and even though it's a bad idea, we have to do it because they're the client or they're the agency or whatever. And you have to be good to work with there too, which I feel like sometimes is this art of, like, picking and choosing which ones you're going to do for money and which ones you're going to do for you. And I think it's always a good idea to just ask and to try and do it in good faith, with a positive attitude. Because if you come in and you hate their guts, or you think they're really dumb, and you don't, it's going to seep out. You're going to start using language, or your body language is going to be like, "I hate your guts." So try to have a positive attitude.
But yeah, like it's difficult when you know something's the wrong way, and you are wasting time doing it, but you got to just do it to keep other people happy. But yeah, like you said, you can't just say, no, that's a stupid idea. Then that's going to create all this tension, and then the whole project could be like in the bin. They'll trash it. But yeah, like you said, sometimes you just have to take it on the chin and just do what they say, and then try and hurry back to what you want to do. But yeah, like it's difficult. So in terms of like pitching your ideas, like do you take inspiration and like go back to your like Jim Carrey majestic kind of speeches? Do you get up and do like pitches of what you want the commercial to look like in terms of getting your idea off the ground?
Try to do as much of that. Like, everything's in pre-pro. Like a good production, everything's in pre-pro, and then you're just executing on it and dialing in everything on the day. But like, respecting everyone's position in it, and not trying to talk like everything, even though some places, like, "Oh, dude, you guys are morons." um, but giving everyone the respect and a feeling like they have a place at the table, and try to take their ideas and see what part of what you're trying to accomplish can accomplish what they want as well. Ultimately, most people, um, want to create something that helps them. If that's in their career, like if it's to help them and their boss, like say it's, we made this thing, like our boss is really happy with it. And sometimes that boss isn't creative. Like they'd be pleased with the dumbest thing in the world. So those are kind of slightly different goals. But when we're chatting in pre-pro, trying to figure out like how can we make this awesome. Sometimes I know the creative parameters are already too tight, and in those it's just like, cool, making money, and I'm still gonna make it as good as we can. Sorry, side note, I was talking to my buddies, and we all have the same thing, that even when we're working on something that we're not like stoked on at all, that we know isn't gonna hit the reel, we still find ourselves doing the best we can just because we want it to be good. Even if we know it's gonna be trash, we still, it's like as an artist, you just like, even though I don't want anyone to see my name on this, I don't want them to see it and have it be like, "Oh, that is really, really bad." But going back to like addressing things, it's all in pre-pro, chatting about ideas, getting people excited, making them be like, "Yeah, it's going to be great for you too." Like, let's make this successful for everyone. The whole Stephen Covey win-win mindset, totally, totally true. If people are stoked about what they can get out of it, and you can do something great too, then it's just a lot more synergy and excitement.
I remember seeing something like Ridley Scott was talking about how he even still has to argue with like the 30-year-old advertising agency people, and he's like, I've been doing this for 70 years, they still don't trust what he's got to say. So it's like, oh, okay, at least he still deals with it. But going back, I guess we got about 15 minutes left.
You want to break down some shots, or just I can just talk about it generally?
Yeah, just like the project in terms of how you got it started, and then like maybe a little bit about the shoot day and the editing, and then putting it all together. Like
McLaren was straight spec, all self-funded. The long of the short was like a buddy, my cinematographer buddy. He's like, I just got done shooting this. He was in house somewhere, and he's like, I rented this gear for a week, but we're only shooting for one day, and it was like a red. It's like I can't remember what it was, and then like some master primes, maybe, I don't know, but it was just like sick. What are we gonna make? And I was like, there's something I really want to do, but we'd have to like just bust to get it done because we only had a couple days. And I knew this guy who had a McLaren. And I was like, let's freaking just do it. And I was like, hey, I got a great opportunity for you. And he's like, I'm rich, I don't care. I was like, I get it, but it'd be cool. And, you know, rich people want to be seen in their cars. I was like, we're going to show you just freaking cruising, dude. And he's like, okay, I'm interested now. And we just had like a day to shoot, and we didn't have enough money to get a studio. So I called this guy who had an airport hangar. And like, he's like, I can't, but I have a friend. And it was literally the person I ended up talking to that had an airport hangar I had zero connection to him. Like, it was like, oh, I know a guy who might know you. Can I come shoot in your hangar for free? And he's like, sure. I was like, sweet. And we get there, and I don't know what we were expecting. I was like, hopefully it's dark, and it's not. It's just white everywhere, just white walls, white ceiling, white floor. And so we rented a bunch of neg and just negged everything around it. And then we just shot a bunch of stuff, and we were so rushed by it that we're like, there was no story. It's just like, let's just get some cool shots. And then once we were done, we're like, freaking, this is amazing. I was like, okay, cool. Like, I want to make some kind of I want to make something cool out of it. It's not enough just to have these shots, you know? And then I was like, sweet. And I was like, this should only cost me like $5,000 to do all these other shots. And it was like 15 grand. My wife was like, cool. That's a chunk, you know, would have been nice to have a new car. I was like, sucks to suck because I'm shooting a McLaren spec. And so, yeah, I ended up shooting the whole thing over the course of like a couple months, just like whenever we could find crew that could come help for free. I think like it's just like all the gear rental was expensive. And then it's like, we wanted to shoot the ballerina stuff on anamorphics, and those are expensive. And yeah, but I mean, it was cool that we were able to accomplish it for like, I think it was like 20 grand. It was just shy of 20 grand. Like, cause then, you know, I was like, oh, there's costs for post, you know? Oh yeah, and someone's not paying for it. I gotta pay for it. And so, and then, I mean, it's obvious it's spec because we're playing like this super popular song, the Woodkid song, but it had enough people like, oh, that's pretty sick. And I was like, cool, worth it. It was 20 grand to have a couple of people be like, cool. I was like, worth every penny.
And where did you film it?
All in Utah. So we shot one part at a dry lake bed. We shot one part in this super empty area by this Great Salt Lake, like in the middle of nowhere. And like, they were all places like, we have to shoot this, and it's like, I want a violinist, I want a ballerina, I want a motocross guy. And we got lucky because like the motocross guy is like one of the best in the state, and he's such a homie. He's like, yeah, dude, that sounds sick. And he just came out. He was awesome. The violinist, there's like this violinist from Utah named Ashton Sterling, and she has a whole YouTube channel. She just dances and plays the violin. I was like, I want to do something like that, but super refined. I want it to be this calm or like this evocative thing and less poppy. And this gal was like, I could do that. And she did it. She was awesome. Went out to this really cool place in Utah called the Sun Tunnels. It is in the middle of nowhere. Super cool place, like, that has those giant cinder block, or not cinder block, just cement. I don't know what you call them, just like tubes, pipes, whatever, just huge industrial size. And I was like, oh, it'd be so cool if she were playing in there. And that was actually really difficult because it was so windy there, and she was free. It was freezing. It was so cold. Like one of the last shots is one of the first shots that we see of her in the piece, where she's like pulling a bow up to start playing, and like we're having a hard time with the camera, and she's literally like shaking, and then we're like, we need you to hold your breath because we can see your breath and we don't want to see your breath. So we were like, and action, she'd be like, just like dying. And then like we finally got one take where it worked, and then the ballerina wasn't incredible. We found this awesome place. I was just like, I want big windows, let in a bunch of natural light, and haze it up, make it look cool, and found a cool place. Yeah, so all of it's shot in Utah. All the talent's from Utah. All the crew is from Utah, which saved us. I don't think there's any way we could have done that in LA, just with all the permits and
the rules. Yeah. And then did you show it to McLaren after and try and sell it like the other?
Yes, we did, and it was kind of a bummer because we sent it to them. They're like, cool, we'll send it to this smaller branch, because there's McLaren, and then there's like the 50 branches of McLaren, and we got in touch with the America branch or whatever, and they're like, this is awesome, except we don't sell this model anymore. And I was like, oh, I'm so bummed out, because he's like, we would love this, except we just stopped selling this model. And I was like, sick. And then he said, but we want to do something with you. And I was like, cool. And then we were in talks about doing something for, I can't remember what model it is. I always forget the names of the McLarens. You'd probably know it. But all they got squashed because of COVID. So it was one of those things that's like, oh my gosh, this is actually opening a door. It's not going to be their full, agency size stuff, but it's like, do something official for McLaren. Awesome. And then it all got squashed from COVID. And then the guy that was our contact quit, so I was like, well, whatever.
Yeah. Having the right car and all that kind of stuff is important. Even working with the dealerships to get the cars and stuff to make sure that it's something I think is important. But what about like the Porsche commercial? Was that the same kind of idea on spec?
Yeah, it was. We had some shots that we were already in the can. It's like, I want to tie in some elemental part of it to make it cool other than just car shots. And there's this old spot. Now I can't even remember what it was. But I mean, it's been done before by a bunch of people, but it was just a bull, it's like this backlit bull breathing through its nose. Super cool. And I was like, that's cool, but I don't want to do a bull. First of all, it's not going to play. I think it was for Lambo or something, which makes sense. But it was like, I want to do something related to the horse, even though the horse we ended up using was not a stallion at all. I was like, I really want it to seem like powerful, graceful, elegant, powerful, like a Porsche. Which, by the way, it's Porsche. They'll tell you, man. The Germans, if you say Porsche, they're like 9 East Porsche. But I knew this gal who had these. They look like Clydesdales, but they are gypsy horses, is what they call them, and just beef. They're not meant to run. They're not really like these. This horse was like $500,000 horse, and it was like this huge award. It's like it took the first place in like 10 things for some horse competition. I don't know, but it's this really expensive horse, and we were worried because we're running haze outside, like this big smoke machine, and we shot stuff with an FPV too, and we're like, it's dangerous. First of all, the horse can exhaust itself because it's like a dressage horse. It's a competition horse, so it's used to precision stuff, and it's not meant to go for long runs basically. And so we're trying not to exhaust it. And then we're also really, like FPV, the whole idea of FPV is to get as close to something as you can. That's what makes it cool. It's like, well, if you hit this horse's eyeball, I don't think our insurance is going to cover a $500,000 horse. And then, but the horse was awesome. The rider, she was amazing. She's a competition, dressage and stuff like that. And she was a good sport because also the horse is so wide because it's so big. So it's not like riding a stallion, steed where it's just like, cool, you can ride for hours. It's so wide. So your legs are just, and this gal that's riding is just this tiny, dainty sweetheart, which is cool to see the power and control she has over such a majestic animal. And she was a good sport, and we ended up getting some cool stuff. And I was like, oh, this is rad. This is something I can share. And so, yeah, it turned out.
Sweet. So I know you got to go now. So is there any last thoughts that you can kind of give, maybe some advice for other people who are kind of looking to get into filmmaking, maybe car commercials? Like, I think you've been working on all these other projects where you don't really show, and then the stuff that you really want to passion projects, put your own money into and let people see. Like, I think that's a good way of kind of going about it. Is there any advice that you can kind of give to other people?
I'd say the first thing is have a mindset of abundance. There's enough work. There's enough opportunities for everyone. Which we don't usually feel like that. We kind of feel like, oh, if I get this job, or if I don't get this job, that means someone else gets it, and we can be competitive. And that kind of breaks down the idea of creativity. And filmmaking is a team sport. You got to work with other people. So be someone that has this idea of like, hey, we can all win. And then I'd say the other thing is just ask for as much as you want. Like, if you want to be a cinematographer, but you're doing something else, or you want to be a gaffer, or you want to be a director, but you're worried about saying it, just say it and be it. And just have the guts to just do it. And who cares? Everyone else be damned. Just say it. And then just saying it and doing it and believing it can be done, you'll do it. And I'd say the third and final thing is be cool. I mean, there's a lot of people that are successful that are a-holes, but there's a lot of people that are really successful that are really cool. I've been fortunate to know and work with a lot of these people. And it's just me reach out to people, call them, email them, say, hey, your stuff's awesome. You seem super cool. Let's do lunch. And you'll be surprised. Some of them that you link up with can have a pretty intense impact on you, and you can have a great impact on them. So be cool, have a mindset of abundance, and then just call people and tell them, yeah, I'm so-and-so, I do this. Let's do something. And they'll be like, hell no. And then try it again.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a very insightful conversation, and it's been great getting to hear a little bit about your story, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, Roy, I appreciate you taking the time, man. This was fun. Wish I could stay longer, but appreciate you keeping me on task.